Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne.
Welcome to the Empowered Poly Podcast, where we give you the tools to help you feel more empowered
in your polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships
by sharing what we've learned as relationship coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Poly is LGBTQ2IA+, alternative lifestyle, and kink-friendly.
Thank you for joining us,
and enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of the Empowered Poly Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about breaking up. We're going to discuss things like how to end a relationship mindfully, and then sort of what you can kind of do after the relationship is ended, whether you're the person that's ending it or the person that's receiving the ending of the relationship. So the kind of self-care things that you can do following a breakup and that sort of stuff. So yeah, so welcome.
Yes, welcome. I'm just going to put a trigger warning out at the top of this episode because there is domestic violence mentioned. And this discussion is about ending a relationship. That's sort of the focus that we're taking. But if you have more than one partner and they are connected, you can request to continue a relationship with one person while ending or shifting out of a particular dynamic with the other person. So you can make that request, absolutely, and you may get a no, but there's certainly no harm in asking. Often that can, be very possible depending on the dynamic that you're in. So
you're referring to dynamics like triads, quads, that kind of thing, right? Where you've got those separate relationships and you may want to end a relationship with one partner but not the other.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. I suppose what comes to mind for me when it comes to ending a relationship, it's also the same thing that comes to mind for me first when I consider communication in general, which is your environment. Where are you? So you want to create a safe space, right? You don't want to have these conversations during difficult or challenging times. If you've got something, or if you know that the person that you need to talk to about it has something that they need to do immediately and there's a time constraint, then you might not want to bring this up. You might want to wait until, both of you are in a less rushed state in order to do it. I guess also, now that I think about it too, there's a disclaimer here to make sure that if you don't feel safe, that you have an immediate exit strategy. So if you're in a situation where there might be abuse or whatever, and you need to get out of the relationship, maybe consider, or we would invite you to not do that until you have an immediate exit strategy set up so that you can end the relationship and leave immediately.
Yes, and actually sometimes it's even advisable not to have the conversation at all and to just exit.
Good point.
Yeah,
just leave. Yeah. Right, exactly. So it just depends on how volatile the situation is and how safe you feel. Typically choosing a private location and a neutral location, if possible, is best. Simply because, there could be some emotional expression, crying, people might get upset. Things like make sure that you're not tired or over hungry. I talked about it earlier. Make sure that you're not feeling rushed or that you have something, or that the person that you're ending the relationship with has something that they need to do immediately following this. That's just kind of a dick move, frankly. I mean, I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, on your way out the door, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, on your way out the door to that
really important
$10 billion that $10 billion meeting that you're going to be going to, your career is on the line for. I'm ending we don't want to do that. That's not fair, I don't think.
No.
This is all assuming, of course, that this is all possible, right?
Yeah.
Just the other thing too is, and I'm not really good at this, but just make sure that you limit the amount of time for the conversation. Keep it short and sweet. Right?
Yeah.
Anything else to add to that safe space bit?
Well, it really ties in with this, managing your emotional reactions that you're having about the breakup, even before you have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So that you're not bringing all of that energy with you can make it worse for your partner to receive what you have to say. And some ways to do that are, you know, using anti-anxiety or anti-depression techniques, like tapping. You can use self-soothing, think about your five senses, and self-care beforehand, so that you're feeling sort of as good as you possibly can before you come into that conversation. Um, and then also don't imbibe too heavily in any drugs or alcohol before the conversation. Again, those lower your sort of diplomatic skills often. Takes off the filters and things get said that are quite hurtful often. So maybe think about that as well. Consider your mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think, you mentioned, helping do one thing that comes up for me in terms of self-care would be exercise, right?
Yeah.
As well, right? So do some exercise right beforehand or whatever. Another thing that comes up for me too, I guess, is to make sure that when you are doing the breakup, if it's possible, honor the good parts, right?
Mhm.
Talk about the things that, what did you learn from the relationship? What did it offer you? The reason for this is because even in difficult relationships, we still have an opportunity to learn something. We still have an
Yeah,
opportunity for growth, right?
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
However, having said that, I would invite you to read the audience, right? So you don't want to go on too long about this,
Hmm.
but you do want to honor the relationship, honor what you had in the relationship that was good about it. But just don't go on too long because then it could come off as you're trying to sort of ease the damage or even placate somebody. And that's not really, the
Appropriate.
word, yeah, appropriate. That's a good word. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's not really appropriate to do in
Well,
that situation.
placating feels condescending, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
you
Just
know,
make sure it's genuine.
yeah, make sure it's genuine and sort of a summary of, thank you for our time together kind of thing. This is
Yeah.
part of the conscious uncoupling that people talk about. And I don't use that phrase because I use things like shift, right? I like to shift a relationship if possible into another dynamic, right? So the old, um, fear around like let's be friends isn't it's not a bad thing necessarily. It can be quite wonderful to be friends after being intimate partners. I've had that happen. I've had long-term sort of partners that I, you know, end that part of our relationship with. And maybe there's a recovery period before we can be friends, but
Mhm.
then we're able to be. And maybe there's certain conditions on the friendship. Maybe we're mostly Facebook friends,
Yeah.
okay, right?
Yeah.
But I
Right.
like the idea
Exactly.
of shifting if possible. And even an ending to me is a shift, right?
Mhm.
Usually into authenticity. And between the two of us, I think we've done a whole lot of breaking up and had a whole lot of breakups, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We have.
So,
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing because it's a bit embarrassing. But yes, we have for sure.
well, we didn't get to this ripe old age without, going a few times around the block.
Right.
So,
Right. For sure.
hence our wisdom that we are here to impart.
Yes. And take it for whatever it's worth to you.
Exactly, exactly. Anything more about that?
No, I think yeah, just honoring the good parts. I think making sure that the person that you're breaking up with still feels making sure that you're doing everything that you can to support that person and offer them a sense of value and that it's yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. I like to personally write down what I need to say, and also the reasons why. Now, the reasons why don't always have to be shared, but they're useful to me personally because I tend to, after a breakup, idealize what I had. And in doing that, want to reach out, want to reconnect, want to take it back. I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Um, and so remembering is kind of hard for me once it's over. why did I break up with that person? Because my idealism really rises to the surface, my romanticism. And also you're dealing with grief and loss and loneliness, even as the person who's, doing the decision making here. If it's not a mutual breakup, you know, that person who made the decision is still going to go through some stuff. So it's really helpful for me to have that written down, and writing it out by hand also, makes a better connection to the brain in terms of remembering, right? Because yeah, we just, as human beings, in order to survive in the world, I think we've adapted pretty well to this idea of loss and and remembering the good stuff, right? Once something's passed.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I like that idea too. It also helps me when I write things down because it helps me to stay regulated during difficult conversations,
oh yeah, because your
right?
emotions are running high, and
Mhm.
and your partner's probably going to ask why. And if you
Mhm.
have nothing to say, it's going to feel really, oh, I don't know, awkward and difficult.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, it could.
If you don't know why
Yeah.
you're breaking up with me, then why are we breaking up? Like that kind of a feeling. Uh,
Right. Having said that, though,
no,
you don't owe anybody that answer,
that's true.
right? So there is a balance there. If you feel like that's something that you want to share after having been asked, that's fine. But
Right.
understand that if you don't want to share that information for whatever reason, you don't owe them that.
Good point.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, so I guess the next thing too, and you kind of touched on this earlier, is be clear about what you want moving forward. Do
Mm.
you want do you want to stay Facebook friends? Do
Hmm.
you do you not want to do you want to end all contact? Um, so what is it that you need? You know, do you want to have some contact? Do you want to try to shift it from a romantic to intimate relationship into a platonic friendship? And if you do, then be specific. What parts of that friendship do you want or are you open to? On the flip side of that, be open to listening to the person that you're ending or shifting the relationship with. Be open to their inability to be able to do that, as well
Right.
as maybe you don't want contact, but maybe they do at some point down the road, right?
Mm.
So just allow for that negotiation of what that's going to look like going forward. Again, the caveat here is if you want to. If you don't want to, if you want to end all contact with that person and you don't want to talk to them again, that's fine too,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But just be clear about that. Don't leave any space for guesswork.
Right. Yeah. You don't want people to make assumptions after a breakup about what it's going to look like.
Mhm.
You can also, this is something that's we hadn't talked about before this, but you can also have a pre-discussion before you even get to breaking up about how you want to be approached in that case, right? You can talk with your partner and say, if you're going to break up with me, these are the things that I would need, right? For it
Interesting.
to go as best as possible. And that's a really mindful thing to do. It's a gift to your partner to give them that information, and to yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you have any
Though,
awareness around what you would need, and kind of this might help you think through it if you're not in a position of breaking up with anybody or being broken up with, you know, or even if you
yeah.
have been, you could take it into your next relationship. Yeah,
Sorry, keep
that's okay.
interrupting you. So I guess what comes up for me, I have some feels around that.
Do you share?
Yeah. Oh,
Share.
I have feels around that because if 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 a partner of mine were to come to me and ask me how I want to be broken up with, that would send me into a
Yeah,
spiral, I think. I
yeah.
think I think as some yeah, so I'd be like, why the fuck are you asking? Like, what's happening? Are you going to be and literally I think I would be like waiting for the next shoe to drop forever after that conversation.
Oh, okay.
So
So
while
maybe know your
I
partner
under
well.
yeah, I was going to say, while I understand the intent
Mhm.
behind what you're suggesting, I would invite you to consider your audience in that situation. if your partner is like me and they have struggled with emotional dysregulation and they have challenges with their emotional life, then you
And,
might not want to do that.
and some
Because
abandonment trauma, right?
yeah, some abandonment. Yeah, that definitely hits my abandonment feels hardcore.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
like
well, note to
even
self, will not have the discussion
yeah,
with you.
even as I say that, I'm playing with something and my getting all fidgety and my hands are starting to get
Oh.
sweaty. Yeah, so don't ever do that to me. Um, just
Don't
pull the
take your own
band-aid off
advice,
quick.
Leanne.
Just pull the band-aid off quick. But that's a good point though, I think, because getting curious about that. Will that work with, like, ask yourself, will that work with my partner? Will it work with this partner but not that partner, right? I
Mm,
mean, there's three things ultimately that we're talking about here when it comes to communication, effective communication, is audience, intention, audience, and environment, right? And this speaks to the audience, right?
mhm.
Who's your audience? Who are you talking to, right? If you're
Right.
talking to a partner who doesn't have abandonment issues, who's very, secure in their attachment style, then sure,
Mhm.
that might be an appropriate conversation. But if you're talking to somebody who's not those things, then that might trigger them unnecessarily, especially if there's not even a thought that you're going to break up with them,
Well,
is that
and I've actually heard of people doing this when they start dating, which is an interesting time point, right?
okay?
Because that sets up uh, the possibility of a breakup going mindfully and well and smoothly, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
true.
although people do change over time, and the more they invest, and once you've been in a long-term relationship with them for a while, they might feel differently. So, you know, all of that is
Yeah,
also true.
yeah. I think that, I mean, if you have that conversation when you're dating, like on the first or second or third date or whatever, at the beginning of a relationship, and then 10 years pass, I mean, chances of somebody remembering that information, number one, and then number two, we've probably changed pretty significantly in that 10 years.
Yes, yes.
So I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm gonna respectfully disagree with that piece of advice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your perspective, because when I first read about this as a part of the conscious uncoupling approach, I was like, right? I'm not sure how I would feel about that. And
Mhm.
then I read more and I kind of was like, oh, well, maybe it's okay, right? Maybe it's a real mindful way to do things. Maybe you can get some information from your partner that you wouldn't have just by being in a relationship with them.
Mhm.
Um, so it felt felt like a good idea to share it at the time. Um, and
I think that,
I'm not saying that it's not a good idea for some people, right?
yeah, I think there's value in it for some people.
Hmm?
And if you feel like you are one of those some people, then go for it. But I wouldn't personally advocate for that. I
Gotcha.
wouldn't personally invite a client to do that.
Well, even having this conversation with you was really helpful,
Right.
right?
Right. Maybe you want to talk about instead of talking about instead of talking about how to break up, maybe you might want to talk about how do you like difficult conversations? Like what works best for you when it comes to difficult conversations, just as a
That's
broader
actually lovely.
sense of who they are, right? And how they show up, and like, do they need a hot tea, and do they prefer to have them at night? Do they prefer to have them in the morning? Like, it, that might be a more appropriate conversation to have. I don't know if
Mhm.
appropriate is the right word there or not. I'm sorry. But that might be a more
Helpful.
mindful approach.
Yeah.
Helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
That might be a more helpful conversation to have. Because if you've reached the point in a relationship where you're going to break up, then does it really matter at that point? Like, you've kind of made up your mind, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, people have.
You know,
Although
or
we do have personal experience, or I have anyway. I can't speak for you, where, there's been a breakup and then there's a reunion not long after, and, you go back into the relationship and try again with new information, or better boundaries or other conversations having been had. So, you know, sometimes it's a absolutely yes, I know this decision is final, and sometimes it's a this is how I'm feeling right now. If there's new information, I might change my mind, right? So
Mhm. Yeah, true. We kind of went off
we
top.
did, we
Well,
certainly did. So anyway,
that's good
back
though.
to where we were. You mentioned earlier, having a specific time period for the conversation. And to that end, like, don't go over and over and over things. Um, Something that happens a lot for people is sort of the long drawn out all-nighter where you're really not getting anything accomplished. It's just kind of you're both mired in your own sadness around the dissolution of a relationship, and there's no benefit to the drawing it out piece. What you want to try and accomplish is, stating what you need to state in a kind and compassionate way, and holding to it, right? Even if they don't agree with your reasoning, even if you can't articulate your reasoning, like you said earlier, you don't owe anybody that. And trying to not engage in arguments. If they start shaming and blaming, validate that you hear them. I hear that you're hurting. I hear that, this is really upsetting you, and you're frustrated by my reasoning, right?
Mhm.
And don't go any further. So in that sort of, I don't know, like an hour time would be probably sufficient. Um, and, you know, let that hour pass with you holding space for them to hear what they have to say to you as well, right? So in that prep that we talked about earlier, where you're getting ready to have the conversation, remember that part, that you're going to need to keep yourself as regulated as possible. And if you're not able to have a way of leaving, make sure that, that's accessible to you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Um, and if it ends up not being an hour, that's fine too, right? If the person that you're
Mhm.
breaking up with decides not to say anything in response, or, you
Yep.
know, fuck you, get out, right?
Yep.
Then, just prepare yourself for drop any expectations of any kind of specific response,
Right.
right? And just let whatever happens after you've said what you needed to say happen. I will say too, and maybe it's a reiteration, but if you've told them why and they've asked you repeatedly over and over again, and you're kind of in that cycle of repetitiveness, it's beneficial and helpful for everybody if you break it and set a boundary and say, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, right? This I'm done, right? I've told you why. And so unless there's new information that you want, this conversation needs to be over and I'm going to go,
Yeah.
right? And I think doing that is helpful for the person that's being broken up with too, because they're probably spiraling at that point, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
it would need to stop.
Well, and now we need to talk about like the go part, because sometimes we're not
Well,
going.
yeah, actually, before we get into that though, there is something else that I wanted to share,
Okay.
in terms of, you know, before you do the breakup, um, try to avoid asking your partner or saying, you know what, we need to talk, right? Try to I don't know, try to avoid that. Try to bring it up as
Like the
casually as
worst, it's the
possible,
worst phrase.
right?
Sorry.
We need to talk, like, or I need to have a conversation with you, or whatever. I mean, again, this is if you know your partner well enough to know that they're secure enough to handle that kind of stuff. But I guess maybe the place I'm coming from is from my own personal experiences.
Hmm.
And anytime somebody says we need to talk, and it's going to wait a day or two, or I can't talk to, like, I just, yeah, it's hard. So maybe you want to, make a date. Like, if you don't live together, maybe you make a date, and on the
Hmm.
next date you do it. You have the conversation,
Yeah.
right? Without telling them or implying anything heavy is going to happen. Some might agree with that, some might disagree with that, right? It just depends. But I think it's based upon your audience, right?
Yes. Yes. And hmm, I have some feelings around that too.
Okay.
I like a little bit of a heads up, but sometimes you're right. If it's too long, right, it's really challenging. My anxiety goes.
Mhm.
So like if you have a date with them, it might be good to just say like on your way to the date, hey, I have something that I need to share with you, something like that, so that they have an inkling like, oh, okay, something's going to go down. I don't know what it is, but it's important,
Right.
right? So they
Okay.
don't show up, having come from the bar with 3 drinks in them, or like whatever. It's so that they're prepared for a conversation that's important to their partner,
Right, right. And I
right?
can also see that being a bit of a dick move in some ways too, where it's like, hey, we're going on a date. Oh, by the way, I'm breaking up with you, right?
So
That could,
excited to see you again.
yeah, yeah, I could see that being kind of a dick move as well. You're right, right.
Well, I mean,
I,
having said
but I
that,
guess,
I just recently did break up with somebody. I hadn't been seeing them very long, so it might be a little bit different, but we had a date set up, and I just made up my mind that that was the time I was going to bring it up, and I didn't give them the heads up. Um, but there had been some indications of scheduling issues and difficulties getting together prior to. So I think they already had a feeling.
yeah, yeah, true. And these are all situational, right? And
Yes.
you have to consider your audience and your environment. So maybe going on a date, to a nice restaurant and breaking up with somebody isn't the best environment to do that in. So just give that some thought. But being mindful about it, I think, well, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
I was just thinking, go on the date to the nice restaurant and eat first, because then you know that your partner is
There,
not like hangry before you talk to them. But then I was thinking, well, it's not really cool if they're footing the bill, right? Like, don't do that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Go Dutch.
yeah.
Um,
Or just offer to go for a walk,
yeah, go for a
right?
walk. I've been to a dinner where I've tried to talk about what I needed in a relationship, even. It wasn't a breakup. It didn't intend to be a breakup. It turned into one. But neither of us ate this really expensive meal that we had ordered,
Oh,
right?
brutal.
But that's kind of awful. It was kind of
Did
an
you at
awful
least
moment.
take
And
it
we
take
we
it
were looking
home?
forward to it. What?
Did you at least take it home and eat it later?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yes.
Well, not all
Yes.
was lost then.
And I stopped
All
and
right.
got ice cream. So
So I guess to sum that bit up, what I'm trying to say is, um, if you feel the need to give some level of a heads up, don't make it too long in advance,
yes.
right? Having said all of, and for some reason I feel like I need to caveat this every time, but having said all of this, if you're if you don't feel safe and you don't feel safe doing that, then don't, right? These are all just suggestions. These are all just ideas, things to consider and get curious about. Will this work best for me in this situation? Will this work best for me with this partner, but maybe not that partner,
Hmm.
right? That kind of stuff. These are all things that we're just inviting you to get curious about based upon our own experience. So there is no hard and fast rule here, right? In fact, we don't like rules. So there is no hard and fast way of doing something. It's just
Hmm.
these are sort
Yes.
of things that you can get curious about before you have the big conversation, right?
Yes. Or
Would you say
during.
that's
Yeah.
or during? Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's fair? Would you say it's a fair
Absolutely.
statement?
Yeah. There's
Okay.
no there's no cookie cutter way of breaking up.
Right.
I've had public breakups, I've had private breakups. There's advantages to both. Um, in the public space, it tends to be more truncated and short so that it's not drawn out. In the private space, it can turn into that all-nighter that I was talking about with, if you're still living together, very little escape, right? So
Mhm.
that can be exhausting and really awful to go through. So,
Oh,
and for some people, that's really healing and beautiful. That turn like I've had those breakups too, where there was tears and slow dancing and cuddles and goodbye sex, all that
Oh
yumminess,
my God, I'm gonna
that
cry.
private space too. Pardon?
I'm gonna cry.
What?
That's beautiful. I want to break up like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the best breakups I've ever had.
Right? I'm feeling a little envious. I've
Well,
never had a breakup like that.
it won't be me. So
Yeah.
maybe you
Yeah.
should talk to your partners about how you'd like to be broken up with. Hmm?
No, no, we're not going to have that conversation. All right. So moving on.
Yeah, next steps. So the conversation has occurred.
Right. Right. So, just as a note, when you're in the middle of, or when you've finished up the conversation and you've made it clear what you want moving forward, and you kind of want to say maybe, you know, what now, what next, that kind of stuff. Just remember that one or the other of the parties might not be in a space to be able to answer that question right away. So you might
Yeah.
want to give it a few days,
Yeah.
and then maybe just show up with a text or something, or phone call or whatever, and just say, okay, so what now, right? Because going back to what I just said, which was that these are all ideas and things to get curious about. Breakups can get messy, right? No matter how much preparation you go into it with, no matter how mindful you try to be, it can go sideways,
Yeah.
right? So just be mindful of that. So if you feel like it went sideways, then give it some time, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even give it enough time to where the other person reaches out to you. And if they don't, well, then you kind of know where you stand. And
Mhm, mhm.
you know what's next because you haven't heard from them in 3 weeks, right? Um, and of course, all of this information varies depending upon how long you've been in the relationship. If you've gone on 3 dates, then it's probably going to be a little bit different than if you've been together for 30 years.
Yeah.
So if you don't live together, it's a pretty simple, in my mind anyway. You might have some stuff at their place, or they have some stuff at your place, or whatever, that you might have to arrange to get, to pick up, and all of that stuff. I personally would suggest that you do that later after the conversation, a few days later. Um, but just make sure that that you allow for some space for that to happen.
Mm,
And if it does happen, and you are the one that has done the breaking up, and the person comes to get their stuff and they want to rehash, don't. Just set a boundary, and just, hey, look, we've already talked about it. I've already shared the information with you. I've shared what I needed to share with you. Here's your stuff. I respect your feelings right now, but I need this to stop, and I need you to leave, right? And that's okay to do, right? That's okay to do. If you're the person that's been broken up with, and you're coming to collect stuff, and you feel the need to want to have that conversation again, I would suggest don't. Like, if you've already had it and it's been drawn out in a long conversation, don't have it, at least not then anyway. Maybe wait a little while and see, like, because you said maybe people can reconnect down the road. Not trying to give anybody hope here. I'm just trying to say that it does happen. But that we need to let that happen. Then and I think we're going to talk about this in a bit too, but we need to let the emotions settle.
yeah.
We need to let
Yeah.
everything settle down, right? It's really important. If you do live together and you're hoping to continue to cohabitate with them, let them know right away so that no assumptions are made. They might agree, they might not agree, depending upon the way things are set up in your life. Like, if you're, you know, well, yeah. Anyway, if they do agree to it, then that's great. But just let them know up front that this is what you'd like to do, right? So
Right.
if
Yeah. So they
and,
don't
and
go
maybe
making decisions about, moving out right away if that's not necessary and you both are comfortable continuing to cohabitate. I know many couples who've done that, and I've done it for certain periods of time myself, um, with varying levels of success. But I know someone personally who, because they had children and their house was large enough, one of them took one floor, the other took the other floor. They co-parented until their kids were grown, and then they sold the house. So there's lots of ways people design breakups.
Right.
There's also situations where people will, continue to cohabitate because they share other things in their lives, maybe children, maybe
Mhm.
not, but their finances are tied up, or they have investments together, or they, are deeply invested in their family, or taking care of an elderly relative together, or one
Mhm.
of them is sick and needs help. Um, so, there's lots of reasons why people decide to continue to live together too,
Mhm.
um, that are totally valid, but it might
Another,
not be possible immediately, and it might come with time, or
right.
it might not.
Well, yeah, and another reason too is you might possibly be in a kitchen table poly dynamic where you all live together, and you're breaking up with one partner but not the other,
Hmm.
and so you're still a part of the household,
Yeah,
right? And you that's the established dynamic that you guys have all agreed to, and so you want to still live in that house and still have a relationship with one of the partners, just not the other one. You need to
yeah,
make that clear right away. But you also need to make it understand too that there's going to be a grieving process that that other partner is going to have to go through, right? And making a space for that to happen is important,
yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. If you have children in the picture, shared children, it's a good idea to discuss what they'll be told and how and by whom. If you can do a joint discussion where it is we have decided that we're not going to, live together anymore, or not going to be romantic together anymore. Um, that's helpful because then it's not a blame game and the kids don't feel like they have to take sides, or one parent is right and one is wrong. Um, or if there's multiple parents in the picture, having a unified front between the three or more of you is really helpful. If you can't accomplish that, and you're being told, well, you're the one who's made this decision, so you have to tell them. Just, remember not to say anything negative about the partner that you're breaking up with, because they matter to your children, right? And to take the high road that way, and again, not engage in the blame game, and just say, this is happening. It's not about how much we love you. We love you very much. That can still be presented to your kids, and really help to, you know, help smooth that transition for them, because they'll blame themselves in many ways often, just because children are very self-centered and they don't understand that things happen, without their direct influence, or you know they can often take things very personally, right?
Mhm.
um if you need to ask them to leave, it's nice to give them a grace period to prepare. The whole get out of my life moment is very dramatic and sometimes important. If it's not important, offer a grace period of a few weeks for them to get their stuff in order so that they can make a transition successfully, and not just end up couch surfing and being miserable. That's being a compassionate partner in the breakup, right? And it's not a good idea legally often to leave the shared home if you own it. And if it's a rental situation, the person who's the leaseholder, who's on the lease, should stay. If you're both on the lease, doesn't really matter then, right? But do give your landlord heads up that you've left the property on the state, so that they know that if there's any other issues at the property, they're not about you. Um, and yeah, I think that's it. Oh, if you need to leave, it's a good idea to have all of that done, the preparation done, so that you've got a place to go and you're packed, right? If you're assuming that that's how things are going to go down, or if that's your preference, or that's what you want to
Mhm.
do that before the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, what's
So,
next?
so we touched on this a little bit earlier, but just be mindful of the fact that everyone involved is going to be grieving, and that includes the person that did the breaking up with the other person,
Yeah,
right? They're grieving, they're grieving the loss of what they thought would be, and they're grieving
Mhm.
the shift or the taking one path and now they have to shift and take another path, right? So just recognize that the grief is real and it needs to be tended to, right? And so resist urges to return to the relationship or the dynamic that just ended, right? And you kind of touched a little bit on that about going back to partners and stuff. Give it some time. Like just let the dust settle, let the emotions calm down,
Mhm.
sit with those emotions and allow them to be processed before you make any decisions moving forward about any relationships.
Yep.
Just give it time and allow for that grieving to happen. And also understand that the grieving isn't linear, right?
Oh yeah,
So you might feel better in a week, but then in 4 weeks you might feel worse, right?
indeed.
So just be mindful of that.
So, part of the how to take care of yourself following a breakup, whether you're the person who made the decision or the person who received it, um, you might want to consider reducing or stopping contact, like you mentioned earlier. Sometimes a no contact is really the only way to break a cycle of, reunion, breakup, that kind of stuff. Um,
Mhm.
you might need to change how you see them on social media, right?
Mhm.
People like to express themselves on their social media, and you may not want to see that expression, or they may not want you to see it. So if they make a request or they let you know that they're blocking you or they're not going to be friends with you on Instagram or Facebook or not follow you, don't take it personally. See it as self-care because that's a method of making sure that we're not seeing things that are going to be difficult for us. Even going down memory lane can be difficult, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you might need to actually take that step to block someone if they continually blow up your phone and want to talk. And, you can warn them and say, this is too much. I'm not interested and I'm going to be blocking you if it continues. If you want to be kind to them, or you can just block them, right?
Mhm. Yeah, those are really good points. Another point to add to that too is if you are the receiver of the breaking up and the breaker upper says to you something to the effect of, yeah, but I still want to be friends. I still want to connect. I still want to talk. I still want to, I still want you in my life. Just understand that it's okay to say no.
Yes.
It's okay to say no. I don't want any of that. If you're breaking it off with me, you're breaking it off with me. I don't want any contact with you. I don't want any, I don't want to have any kind of a relationship with you. You don't need to feel obligated to continue a relationship with somebody that's breaking up with you. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes people are saying that as a way to help ease their own discomfort and awkwardness
Hmm.
and guilt, maybe even, right? And so it's not necessarily always about you. Sometimes it can be about them more than it is about you, right? And it's just
Mm.
one of the things that we do as a society is we want to help. I'm hurting this person, and I want them to feel as better as good as they can in a difficult situation. So I might say something like, "But we can still be friends. I mean, it's still open to talking to you. You can message me anytime."
Hmm.
But if you're like, "No, I'm not feeling that. I don't want that," then don't feel obligated to do it.
Well, and also,
Set your
even
own
if you,
boundary.
yeah, and if you do agree, allow it to organically shift if it does for you, right? Like I've agreed to that many times, and then, we exchange a couple of texts and maybe a couple of gifts and a meme here and there, and then it trails off
Yeah, it just kind of
and it
goes, yeah,
organically
right.
changes. That's okay.
It is okay too. Yeah, for sure. But I think the important thing is it's okay to do it however you need to do it
Right.
as the person being broken up with. You do not owe them anything.
Well, and as the person making the decision.
Right.
Like we're both all everyone involved is a sovereign being able to make
Mm-hmm.
autonomous decisions for themselves and to change their minds and to morph over time, right? And to
Mm-hmm.
be good with something one day and feel overwhelmed by it the next. Maybe
Right.
we say we want to be friends, but they're texting me all the time and I feel very awkward with that after a while. I need to set the boundary and say, feels like too much.
Yeah. Or maybe you there's this how am I going to say this? I don't know. Maybe there was an element of your relationship that you don't want to continue, but you still want to be friends with them. So let's say, for instance, you don't want any intimacy or sexuality or sexual contact with them, but you still want to be friends. So you make that clear. Yes, I'm still open to talking to you, but these things are now off the table. Don't send me any nudes. We're not going to
Right.
do, sexy talk. We're not going to do any of that. Right. But I am still open to connecting with you and talking with you. Right.
Mhm.
So maybe you get clear about those boundaries. Again, if the breakup has just happened, you don't have to have those answers. You can
Right.
give it a while, and then you can come back. Or if the person reaches out to you and says, "Hey, do you want to be friends?" or "How you doing?" or "How you feeling?" You can say, "I'm feeling good and I'm feeling fine, and I'm open to being friends, but I don't want any of these things anymore." Right? Okay.
Well, and sometimes I'm just going to throw in one more point. Sometimes the
Yeah.
contact isn't about you not actually wanting to hear from them, but you know that because of maybe, their own personality, it's going to be hard for them to say no, and they'll want to kind of rehash things, or they'll want to spend as much time with you as they can,
Mhm.
even though you would like that time now to grieve and heal and move forward. Um, so it can be really important for them for you to say, I'm not comfortable with ongoing contact, right?
Mhm.
So know your partner, and apply what you know. Obviously, be open to possibility if you think that that's something that you would like down the road. If you really do want to be friends down the road, maybe
Mhm.
what you say to them is, let's try no contact for 3 months and then we'll touch base again, or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah,
You
that's
can
a good point.
negotiate. Yeah.
Right, that's a really good point. Um, so all of this has happened, and the conversation has happened, and we're talking about following the breakup. Um, One of the biggest things that's been helpful for me in my life in every situation that's challenging is to sit with your feelings.
Yeah, you
Don't
mentioned
try
that
to
earlier. Yeah.
yeah, don't try to suppress them. Um, because oftentimes that just makes it louder, and they can oftentimes pop up in unexpected ways. So
Mm,
just simply sit with your feelings. Just allow the experience, whether you're the doer or the receiver here, right? Just allow for the experiences to happen and give it time. I know time, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason because it's true. It works. Just give it time. Sit with those feelings, process through them. You can use movies, music to connect with your feelings,
mhm.
and give them some attention. Journaling, those kinds of things, right? Um, Even if you feel numb, recognize that that is also a coping mechanism of sorts. It really is. It's that you're numbing
For
out
sure.
because your body's like, I've reached maximum capacity here. I can no disassemble Johnny Five. Like I cannot process anything else anymore, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so your body just sort of shuts down, and that's okay because you're just in a state of overwhelm.
Yeah.
And it's normal. Just recognize that that's part of the grieving process, and it's probably going to come up later as well. And you just have to sit with it. Before we go any further, I had a note that I wanted to kind of circle back to.
Okay.
Um, and it's all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. So I apologize to our listeners slash viewers for kind of bouncing back up there. But something just hit me. When you're doing your preparation for breaking up with somebody, um, try to avoid blaming them. Because I don't think we talked about that, did we?
Yeah, I mentioned avoiding the blame game a couple of times.
Did we? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to mention one of the tools that we have as coaches available to our clients who are going through this kind of experience or any challenging experience. We have a tool called the Personal Responsibility Guide.
Mhm.
That is super useful when applied to breakups. And what it does is it helps you reframe the experience and pull out sort of what you need to take away from it, right?
Mm.
So that you're growing and learning through this process. So it's really helpful.
Mhm.
Just
Okay.
plug in the program there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So thank you. But I think there's something coming up for me here too around the blame, and I think maybe being more specific.
okay.
Um, when you're writing out your statement or when you're preparing for what you're going to say, stick with I statements
Yes.
as much as possible. So instead of saying you did this to me, like for instance, if somebody was um, I don't know, I can't think of an example because I'm
Okay,
riffing
say
here.
you have a communication problem with your partner. They're just not forthcoming enough, and you don't feel
Hmm.
there's a reciprocated conversation going on with them enough in your life, so you feel lonely and you feel right.
Right. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for the example. So yeah, in that situation, it would be more helpful to say that I need somebody who communicates in a way that I can understand,
Hmm.
as opposed to saying you don't communicate with me or you're not a good communicator,
Right.
because they might be a great communicator for somebody else. They're just not a good communicator for you.
Yes.
So instead of saying blaming them for not being a good communicator, and even if it's, I'm going to say this, probably going to get yelled at, but I'm going to say it. Even if it's pretty obvious that they suck at communicating and it doesn't matter who they're with, it's still just not a kind thing to do. There's no point in it. You can just say it a different way that's more about your needs as opposed to their inability to be able to show up for you in a certain way, right? It's just more about like I just need a different style of communication than what you're able to give me, right?
Yes. And in that regard, sometimes when we're breaking up with somebody, we feel like we have some sort of responsibility to teach them how to relate to other
Yes.
people.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but yes. Praise the gods on that one.
We
Sorry.
don't, that's not our thing. We don't do that. That's not our
No,
job, first of all. It's their job to
no.
figure that out. If they,
Send them our way.
yeah, exactly, send them our way. If they hear from you that you need better communication or different communication that resonates with you, they can take that in and learn from that if they're open to learning from that. If they're not, it doesn't really matter how you say it, they won't receive it,
Mhm.
right?
And
So
if you say that and they come back and say, "Well, what do you mean?" you don't feel like answering that, you don't have to answer it.
yeah,
You can just say
they,
it just doesn't work for me. Or you can say something to the effect of, I think we've talked about this enough over the last how many ever times this has been an issue, because I'm certain this probably isn't something that's just coming out of the blue, right?
right,
And so it's just becoming obvious to me that we are not in alignment with the way that we communicate,
right.
right? And
Great way to put it.
so because of that, I need to end this relationship for me,
Mhm.
right? And it's not about them. You're not blaming them. You're not saying they're a shitty communicator or a bad person or any
Right,
of that stuff, right? But I think that if you do that, typically that will de-escalate a lot of things. Not all the things, but it will de-escalate a lot of things, right?
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because we didn't really talk at length
No,
about it earlier,
that's
but I think it's
fantastic.
really important. All right, so
So
back to where we were.
back to managing
So
feelings. So
yeah,
you mentioned journaling is a great thing to do.
yep.
If you're not a writer, maybe record your thoughts into your phone,
Hmm.
your thoughts and feelings. It gives your thoughts and feelings a place to go, to be heard. And it's nice to acknowledge them because if we don't acknowledge them, like you said earlier, they just get louder. Um, Walking is a great way to get bilateral stimulation along with, things like tapping. You can tap your shoulders, right, left, or your thighs for about 3 minutes to help reduce the intensity of the emotions that are coming up for you. Um, get out into nature and do some of those self-soothing things that we talked about. Um, and music is a great way to get in touch with those feelings. I think you mentioned that before. The self-soothing techniques address the five senses. And so if you think about what do you do to soothe yourself, and you're kind of at a loss, think about, what do you hear, see, smell, touch, what's the other one? Taste, right? And make those things comforting and familiar, and um, that's what you're looking for, is the comforting and the familiar to self-soothe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can also talk to your friends.
Yeah, talk to your
Right?
friends and your
Talk
family.
to, yeah, talk to your friends, talk to your family.
Mhm.
I would I would invite you, if you're in a KTP or triad or quad type situation, I would
Yeah,
invite you to not talk to the other partners
right.
at length about this unless that's an agreement that you all have in place. Because
Yeah,
I think what you don't want to do is, I don't, just because that person didn't work out for you doesn't mean that person's not working out for your partner. So just be mindful of that, that you're not trash talking the person that you've broken up with, or vice versa. The person being broken up with isn't trash talking the person that did the breaking up,
right.
right? So
Yeah.
just be, yeah, I guess it's just all about respect and mindfulness and being conscious.
It's
I
just
see you
like
want to
when
say
we're,
something.
yeah, it's just like when we're talking about children, right? Or other family members. They may have a great relationship with this person, and by undermining that great relationship to feel like you're in the right for breaking up with them is unnecessary. You're in the right because it's not right for you. Period.
That's
End of story.
yes, I love
You
that.
don't
Yes.
need you don't need an army of people to validate that. You validate that. Nobody else needs to. Yeah.
And on the flip side, if you're the person that's been broken up with, you you don't necessarily need for your other partners to be pissed off at them as
Mhm.
well, or upset with them, or angry at them in order for you to be okay.
That's
It
right.
might feel it might feel like you do. It might feel like, that whole misery loves company bit, right? It
Yeah.
might feel like that's true, but it's not, right?
Well,
And so,
we always try to rally with our support group. And if your support group is involved with the partner that broke up with you, that can be really
mhm,
challenging.
right.
Which is why when I'm working with people, I always, talk to them about their support group and expanding it, making sure that they have, a friend that's not involved, someone that they can talk to who's a professional, maybe a trusted
That's
friend
us.
like us, yes, or maybe a trusted family member that's neutral like Switzerland.
Mhm,
So yeah, that need to vent can be alleviated a lot by doing the journaling and the talking
mhm,
aloud and the expressing your emotions for yourself,
mhm,
um, and doesn't have to be at other people, which can be harmful and can actually come back on you later, right? I've
mhm.
had that situation happen. So yeah, just be mindful, like you said.
Yeah. So, you sat with your feelings for a bit. You're allowing them to process. I would invite you to, at some point, to get moving, like literally get moving with your body.
Mm,
When you've self-soothed enough, it's kind of time to move. Not move on, but time to move, right? Because the body is a natural processing machine. It does its own processing in its own way. And if we're moving, right, it releases chemicals into the brain that help us to feel better about ourselves.
yeah,
So anything like exercising, dancing, walking, working out, something as ridiculous looking, but actually it's kind of fun, is just standing there and just jumping up and down and just,
take it
shaking
out.
and yeah, shake it out, right? You
Yeah,
can you can build something with your hands. You can clean the house, right? The yard, or the garage, or whatever. Literally anything to get your blood pumping and moving through your body,
yeah,
right? That is a huge help when it comes to processing. Also, frankly, it becomes a distraction,
yeah,
right? Because we can only take so much of the process of sitting with our feelings before we're kind of at max capacity, and we need a healthy distraction, right? Not an unhealthy distraction. So social media, booze, drugs, right?
sex.
well, random sex that might be risky,
Random dangerous sex. Yeah.
rando dangerous sex that might be risky, right? Those kinds of things,
I'm
those
not
aren't
talking
healthy
from
distractions.
experience. I never did that. Not ever,
Yeah.
mom.
No,
My
me
mom
neither.
watches these.
Yeah, me neither. Uh, sorry, you just threw me off
Sorry.
guard
I'm
there. That was
sorry.
funny. That's okay. So yeah, so I think it's just important to get up and move your body,
Move your body. Yeah.
move your body.
And then part of that distraction piece is taking it this step beyond that. So actually engaging meaningfully with your life. What matters to you? What lights you up? What gets you excited about being alive? Right? What excites you in terms of hobbies or activities, or maybe you don't have a hobby, but you've always wanted to try X. This is the time. Do that. There's lots of ways to learn things now for free on the internet. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can, make plans for a trip that maybe you want to take. Do the things that maybe your partner didn't want to do. Really intentionally ground yourself with, spending time with animals and nature. And again, that support system of people that care about you, that you're close to. And if you don't have one, this is the time to maybe get out to a meetup group and meet people and start making friends. Rearrange the furniture the way you like it. Paint your house or your apartment the way you like it. Make your space comfortable and warm and inviting and yours. I was working on a book when I first got divorced called Reclaiming Your Space, right? And part of that was like me just laying in the middle of the bed, right? Like not leaving the side for the invisible partner that was no longer there. It was a huge transition for me to actually like scooch over to the middle. And I was like, huzzah, I did it. um, and then, make your personal, your professional goals, uh, engage with those and what are you going to want and what do you need to do to get there? Maybe you need help to make those changes. So, reach out, get a coach. um, and then if you're struggling, like really struggling to cope, ask for help. Ask for help. Please reach out to your local mental health support program. I don't think there's anywhere that doesn't have one. And if you're in real need, go directly to the hospital. Keep yourself safe, right?
Good points. Excellent points. Some people like to do like a ritual to help and the energetic like tie that they've had to their partner.
Mm,
Like you can write out your feelings and you can burn them. I've suggested this to clients before that they
mhm.
write out feelings or they write the partner's name on a piece of paper and then they have a little sort of sit down with a fire and then they throw the partner's name in the fire. It's not like you're trying to burn them up, but you're just trying to try or light them on fire. Like it's not a voodoo practice or anything, but you it's just a release, right? It's a way of releasing that responsibility for
Yes.
that relationship, right? Because we can still be holding on to some of that. I'm still responsible for the ending of this relationship because I didn't show up in a certain way or I didn't do something the right way,
Mhm.
right? Or as the person who's doing the breaking up, I'm responsible for hurting that person's feelings. Well, these sort of energetic exercises, these energetic rituals can help to release that
Yeah.
responsibility, right? Um, you can use meditation or prayer to reclaim your energy from the relationship and even do it together if your former partner is willing to do that. Um,
Oh, I had
yes.
that experience with my first husband.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did a meditation about reclaiming energy from a book by Marianne Williamson. I can't remember the title of it, but I'll try to remember and put it into the show notes. And it was really powerful. We did the same meditation simultaneously over the phone, and it was great. I didn't know how powerful it would be, so it was quite useful.
Nice. Cool. You can also do a cleansing ritual using Epsom salts in a bath, right?
Mm.
Some people create a ritual that makes sense and do something like ritualistic things, like reclaiming the things they used to do and places they used to go with their ex-partner, right? So if there's a specific restaurant or something that you guys used to, it was your restaurant to go to,
Mm.
go back to that restaurant by yourself. Go back to that restaurant with a new potential partner. Go back to that restaurant with friends,
Yeah.
right? Make it your own again, right?
Yeah.
Reclaiming, right? Reclaiming your space because you are allowed to take up space in this world, right? And it doesn't matter. Again, it's important to acknowledge that whether you're the breaker upper or whether you're the doer or the receiver, these things apply, right? Because there's
Yeah.
still an element of that energetic connection that you might want to release, right?
Yeah, I remember doing a lot of meditating right before sleep, particularly as a way to kind of continually release the thoughts and the feelings and the guilt and the shame, right? After breakups. That was really, really useful too. Yeah,
Right.
thank you. I think we're
Sure.
I think we're good.
Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about. It
Oh,
just came
okay.
up for me. I just wrote down on a piece of paper in front of me the word community. And I think the reason I wrote it down is because I've experienced in the past, I've personally experienced, and I know of other people who've experienced this as well. So if you are in a breakup, if you've experienced a breakup of a relationship, and the other person that the other partner was abusive to you in some way,
Mm-hmm.
seeking out community resources is huge. Number one. Number two, um, your experience of that person is going to be different than other people's experiences of that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that your experiences of that person are any less valid,
Mm-hmm.
right? So looking for acceptance of your experience from other people in the same community might be challenging. So just understand that, right? And please help me out with the language of this because I want to get this right. I think you know what I'm trying to say.
I do. Yeah, I do. Well, and we find this a lot because and I've dealt with it for decades because before I was sort of in the poly community, I was in the theater community. And uh it's a small community, right? Both of those. And what you find is that the breakups impact other people. They either take sides or they take it personally as a reflection about them in some way. Um, Even more so, I think, in the poly community, because if their experience with the person that you broke up with has been positive, they might not understand or relate to why would you break up with them at all. They don't get it. If they're a partner of that person, they might not understand or get it. Um, so
And
it,
further
yeah,
to that, putting a finer point on it, they might not believe you.
they might not believe you. Yeah, yeah. And especially when we're talking about those toxic behaviors, right? And this is the really hard part to accept is that they might have been toxic with you and not with someone else, or that person didn't perceive their behavior as toxic. So when we're talking about what is toxic, um, that's based on your personal values. That's based on your personal boundaries. It may not be the same for other people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think the reason I bring it up is because if you're if you're the person that's on the receiving end of that toxic behavior and you've decided to end the relationship, I think it's I think it's I would invite you to consider picking and choosing who you share information with.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're looking for support, if you're looking for validation, you may not get it from certain people that you thought you might get it from,
Well, or
right?
just be prepared for that, right?
And yeah, and that's the other thing is just be prepared for that. Be prepared to be like, what do you mean this person isn't abusive? They did this, this, and this to me. and then somebody else might not, like you said, somebody else might not see that as abusive. And they might just see it as the normal course of business in a relationship. And
Hmm.
that's okay. But then you have decisions to make about that relationship and whether that's in alignment, right? And
You're
so,
right. I was going to say you're not in alignment with that person in terms of values,
right,
obviously.
right, exactly. And
Yeah.
yeah, and exactly. And it's just that we have this tendency sometimes as human beings to want to vilify our partners, villainize them, right?
Yeah.
And I think in the process of doing that, we can also damage other relationships.
Yeah. And also, I find that experience gives them a lot of power and influence over me,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
point.
taking up a lot of energy, space, and gray matter and soul matter,
Hmm.
right? When someone's been abusive to me, I can step away from that relationship, separate myself from them entirely, have my experience validated by me, um, and not continue to engage in the story,
Hmm.
right? The story then becomes a problem, a barrier for my growth because I'm stuck in the story. I'm still being victimized, is how it feels to me. Now, not
Hmm.
everybody's going to have that experience, obviously, but that's how it occurred with me. And so it it's more from my perspective helpful to shift away, move on, know that the story is valid because it happened, that my feelings are valid because they occurred and I had them, and that, I don't need to give them any more energy by
Hmm.
holding them in this sort of regard of like, I hate them or they're a horrible person or they should, you know, suffer, right? If you believe in karma, I kind of do. So to me, that's continuing the cycle, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
my personal perspective. And I think we have that in common, you and I.
Absolutely. Yes, we do. Yeah. So and you said it so much better than I did. So thank you. I appreciate it. And it's interesting because what's also coming out for me right now is I feel like I need to caveat that with some qualifier or disclaimer that says that if you're in an abusive relationship and you get out of the abusive relationship, your feelings are valid and they are absolutely 1,000,000% valid. Like I don't think either one of us is trying to say they're not
No, no, no.
under any circumstances. All we're trying to say is just understand that your experience of that person is going to be different, possibly, than other people's experiences of that person. And if you're looking for community in your grief, you may not find it in the people that you think you will.
Right. And there are places to look for that community, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go to a survivors of abusive relationships
That's
program
right.
and show
That's
up
right.
to those. You can talk to a counselor, a coach, or a therapist. You can,
Right.
if you have a trusted friend that's, um, clearly on the same page as you, values wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the safe person.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I think, yeah, I just know some people in the world that have been through something like that,
Oh,
and I just want. It's horrible. It's a shitty situation to go through for the victim in this case.
yeah.
But it's just, yeah. I just wanted to put that out there for people
And
that
it
are
can be
listening.
scary when you're looking for validation and not getting it, not getting it, not getting it.
Right. Then you start to
Um,
think, did I make shit up? Am I going crazy
yeah,
here? Right?
yeah.
So yeah, just be mindful of that. That your feelings are absolutely your experiences, your feelings, the way you see things is 100% valid.
Right.
Right? It's 100% valid. I feel like I just need to keep repeating it. So I'm not going to.
Okay.
so so all right, that's all I wanted to bring up at the end there. So
Well, I think that was a really important point because the expectation might disappoint, right? The expectation that now my community is going to support me might might not happen in the
yeah,
like you said. So,
yeah. Yeah. And your community is not just the people outside your relationship, it's the people in your relationship too, depending upon your preferred relationship structure.
Yes.
So just keep
Yes,
that in mind as well.
indeed. Oof.
Okay.
Ooh, this is a heavy topic, hey?
That is a heavy topic. But we appreciate you guys sticking with us. If you made it this far, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's everything that we had to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll sign off.
Well, just one more thing. As always, if you guys have things that you want to say, we'd love to hear about it. So feel free to shoot us an email. Feel free to make a comment. Feel free to reach out to us, and we love discourse and dialogue about all of this. So please let us know.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Yes, yeah, do the whole
Yeah.
subscribe and like and all that stuff. Because as one TikToker that I follow says, and I forget his name, I'm sorry, but he says it helps in this world.
Yeah, it does.
So.
It does.
So thank you for your help, support, and
Well, and we don't even really know how all of the algorithms work, but if we apparently get comments on our episodes on YouTube, for example, it helps push us to the top of the list.
yeah.
So
So
I'm
that's
just,
one simple and easy way to support.
yeah, I'm just learning about these things.
Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right.
Okay. And remember,
Choose love.
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions, and don't forget to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Poly Relationship Support and Advice.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
And at leannemillion.com.
or follow us on Instagram at @thegregmillion.
And at Leanne Million.